Ma'am, September 11th marks the death centenary of Subramaniam Bharati, great poet, reformist, freedom fighter. What relevance does he have in modern day India and particularly modern day Tamil Nadu?
If there is any one writer, poet who's more relevant to India today than ever before, it is Bharati. For his period, the time when he lived, to have to walk even with your wife in public would have been, it's all right, everybody should go together, but what is it that the two of you all will have to do? You know, that kind. And it wasn't peculiar to any one particular community, but women were, all right, you may be equal, you may do a lot of things at home, but still when we're going, no public display of affection. Bharati, in order to question people who say that, walked with his wife, sometimes having his hand on her shoulder, and walked and spoke and displayed that he treats her equally in public, much to everybody's mocking him. But he didn't allow that to worry him. But at the same time, not just in that kind of a display, the songs he wrote on women of India. What is that women that he's looking at? Indian women are capable of being anything that they, once they take a determination. He saw what I would say, Shakti in each one of them. Not the usual way of, we see Durga, we see Saraswati, but he actually thought empowered women are the ones who are women anyway. So what are we trying to talk about? Empowering women. They are fully empowered. We should recognize them. And also describes who we think is a Indian woman. He sees her walking with, shoulders held wide, chin up, looks everybody into their eyes, doesn't, coyly, none of that. And further goes to describe an Indian woman. So, and he also has that invocation of, if women are this, why would we want to have them anywhere except for equally with us? So I can recite some of those songs that he talks about the power of women.
Please go ahead.
So the one example that I gave you straight away, Nimirnda Nadayum, Nerkonda Parvayum, these are words which are enough for any woman if they want to draw strength. So there are many more like that anyway.
Ma'am, Bharati wrote widely on caste discrimination, equality and secularism. So the opposition and Dravidian parties both have claimed his legacy. The Tamil Nadu BJP is saying that the parties that have ruled the state, have governed the state, have always placed other social reformers such as Periyar above Bharatiya. How do you see this politics playing out?
No, in a way, I would want to say, for a very long time, decades, Bharati was not given his due. And Tamil Nadu, since the death of Bharati till 47, anyway under the British rule, post 47 too. I gave an example today for you. If you were in the place in the Mani Mandapam where I spoke, yes. Bharati's first Mani Mandapam, or the memorial, place, which is what I visited today, was first established in 1945. The groundwork began 1945, and at that time too, one of his sort of patron, there were very few people who patronized or supported, sponsored Bharati. Famous Tamil magazine called Kalki. The founder of that magazine, his name carries the magazine's name, Kalki Krishnamurthy. He was the first one to have found a place in Ettayapuram, sort of created the foundation related work, had Rajagopalachari come and do the inauguration, and in 47 when the whole thing was completed, it was an open, all four sides it was an open structure with a bust of Subramania Bharati inside it, and inside meaning between the four pillars, and it was inaugurated by the then West Bengal governor, again Rajaji, Rajagopalachari, who in fact, these are things which I want to mention because Bharati's eyes always had that fiery flame. People who have seen him have always said that, and they've also spoken about it. So till he went to Pondicherry, Puducherry now, everybody's noticed that fire in his eyes, and with which he would, slightly like a eccentric, he would conduct himself and speak about how India has to be and what is it we have to do, when that kind of outpouring in his poetry. And the way he had to struggle after going to Puducherry and then coming back, trying to come back. And when he wanted to come back to British India from French India, he came via a place called Kadalur, which was also under the border, at the border. He was captured by the British, arrested, kept in prison, everything. But all the while, he didn't have any source of income. One of his child was sent off to his sister. The other child was with him when they were in Puducherry. And to put up with the pain, he had taken into having a bean, as they call it in Tamil, and somehow managed to, and he would go lie in the mango orchards, shout to the sky saying, why is it that you wouldn't want me to speak? Oh Parashakti, tell me. And that kind of outpouring. That is why in the meeting also I did say, yes, it was what he would define, some others would define, prasava vedana. Like when you're about to deliver a child, the excruciating pain that a woman goes through is what he felt when he was delivering each of these poems. A long story short again. When he came back to Chennai, probably he came by train, Rajaji goes to receive him. And all these are very well described in one of his biographies written by a very famous scholar called Prema Nandakumar. She says, Rajaji, on seeing him getting off the train, said, what has happened to him? The eyes have lost the sparkle, that fire. It is not the same pair of eyes. So that the volcanic kind of pouring out, also the eyes reflecting the anguish with which he was saying it all, but yet he was never negative, was graphically described in the book as an observation by Rajaji. So the thing about him is he lived only 38 years. Yes. But he was so full of that force which he wanted all Indians to have and display, to have this country taken to its due prominence. Every one of his poem really comes out with that kind of a force.
Ma'am,
and therefore the question that you've raised.
Yes. We are in Itayapuram. You were at his birthplace. You were at the memorial. The memorial, of course, was built by MGR. Ma'am, it is often that the district administration looks after the upkeep only when it is his birthday or his death anniversary. Why is it that multiple governments tend to forget his contribution, or is it that they are not able to understand his contribution?
No, continuing with the answer to your last question and coming to this. So Bharati's recognition was not across the board for a very long time, and that is why I said Rajaji and others felt there was somebody who was equally eminent called Mapo Sivanyana. He's called Selambut Chelvar. Even he used to speak a lot. But it took a long time, and I'm saying this with a certain sense of responsibility, for some leaders to recognize him who had ignored him for a very long time and then said, yes, we understand that he had a very big role to play for both Tamil and also for the freedom movement. And if politically prominent leaders, I'm not naming them, politically prominent leaders had to say that much after the world had recognized and India had recognized, Gandhi had recognized, it shows that there was an element of politics which played, probably because of his birth as a Brahmin, but the fact that he had lived with values which would bring in all communities together, treating women equally and so on, despite all that, he did not get his due for a very long time, and it took an explicit statement by eminent leaders that yes, Bharati was not given his due. So that is one. Now you came to this point of district administrations only remembering on the birthday or the death anniversary. It is true. And strictly speaking, not just the administration, to make the administration live with the memory of such great people who not in a century, not even in a millennia will we have such people be born again, we need a lot more citizens' consciousness. People will have to be aware, and that is why it's important to recall the fact that Bharati died in 1921, but by 1946 it still took a lot of time, but that is the phase when all of us were struggling for the freedom movement. But the 1946 foundation and the 47 opening of the memorial here was funded by the people of Ettayapuram, and also there was a Ilakkiya Mandram, literary circle within Ettayapuram, which is the one which had the idea of bringing a memorial, and in which many people who were associated with Bharati, even remotely. One example is, he taught Tamil in Setipati High School in Madurai. He did it for a few months and then probably chose to write and become a journalist. That school's students, even in 1946-47, 20 years after his death, wouldn't have seen them, so wouldn't have been taught by Bharati, but still wanted to contribute because former teacher. They all contributed for the first phase of this Mani Mandapam, which was inaugurated by Rajaji in 47. But again, a phase of forgetting Bharati. After 47, we don't know what happened to that memorial. Post 47, God knows what were the kind of activities there. It's sometime in 80 that this new one has come. So unfortunately, periodically we seem to have forgotten the physical structures which remind us of Bharati, and also going there to help keep the memory alive. So I would suggest strongly, not just in Tamil literature, but also Tamil teaching in schools, Bharati will have to be discussed all over the world. Incidentally, he had a great admiration for Shelley. He also took a lot of interest in English literature, and he would carry around Shelley in his hand for some time, and people would say, it's all right, what are you doing with English literature, get going with Tamil, things like that. So he had interest in so many different things.
Ma'am, the Tamil Nadu government recently has said that they are offering money for keeping the house that he lived in Varanasi. All these efforts, would you say it is coming too little too late?
Never mind, at least now. I would rather say, at least now people have waken up to him, to that divine scholar. I purposely use this word. Unless you have the divine thing, grace on you, you couldn't use a word or a language with that kind of a potency which Bharati has used. So he is a divine scholar. Unless you have that God-given power in you, you can't weave words of magic which can be so potent. So I would think these institutions or houses or memorials, whilst all of them are equally important, there should be more studies on him, more research on him, more speaking about him, more taking his thought and saying, is today's India living up to his poems? Such discussions are the ones which can tell us really, which can enrich us really about what a man he was.
Ma'am, Bharati's stature has been no less than Tagore, intellectually. But like Tagore, he is not a national figure. Will your government then make an effort to popularize him and make him a national icon at par with Tagore?
Isn't that what Prime Minister is doing now? Yesterday, marking the 100th death anniversary of Bharati, he has declared that he is instituting a chair in no less a place, Banaras Hindu University, where Bharati himself had gone from here all the way from this part of South India to learn Sanskrit, English and Hindi, and then he comes back to further his interest in Tamil. In Banaras University, Prime Minister has instituted a chair called Subramanya Bharati Chair for Tamil Studies, which immediately lifts the level of research, level of exposure that Bharati and Bharati related studies can have. And I'm indeed very grateful to the Honorable Prime Minister for having just come up with such a brilliant idea at a time when all of us are now sitting up and saying, yes, we should know more about this great poet.
Since we are discussing it, ma'am, the Ministry of Human Resource Development instituted a National Hindi Literary Award in his name. The first award was given in 1989 and then the last one in 2007. And it's been over 14 years that this award has been lying dormant. Would you say time has come to revive it?
Of course, there is enough time, and now very quickly we'll have to apply our mind and see if we can revive it. I will definitely talk to the concerned ministry and see if there's anything we can do immediately about it. Time to revive it.
You have often quoted him in your speeches, and that has made a lot of people curiously read him. Then how do you elevate him to national spectrum, to make him part of the national consciousness?
Yeah, that's where I think we will have to deliberately have universities discuss what Bharati means. We should have youngsters look into everything that is written it. And on that, I would think Tamil youngsters have a greater responsibility than rest of India.
I'm seeing that fire that you have talked about in your own eyes when you are talking about him. What does he mean to you personally? And when you are here at his birthplace on the death
Oh,
centenary?
actually today, I've also gone to his house, which we temporarily lived in Puducherry. I've also gone to that house in Tiruvallikeni, which is Triplicane in Chennai. There are some lines of his which are constantly, there in my mind somewhere. And I honestly do draw a lot of inspiration from him. Come on, that kind of a word, the power of word and power of every word that he utters is something which you can enjoy and for that moment read, but it will linger in you. And it is that lingering power of word which always guides me. But above all, Marya, what about Bharati, that which is in me? For all this, for all that suffering, for all that looking at India suffering, for all that hoping India becomes free. He was a very spiritual person.
Now 5 questions as the Finance Minister. Ma'am, a lot of economic indicators are showing that perhaps the Indian economy is out of the woods and we are on the path of revival. What are the risks, according to you, that India's recovery path has?
Within the country, the risk is we have to keep going with the vaccination. If protection from corona is given to people with the vaccines, I think that would eliminate very many related risks. And therefore, I'm glad that the government's vaccination effort is going well. Even as we talk, I think we'll be touching 75 crores, at least one dose, that is. And hopefully the second dose numbers will also now increase. So with this, I'm confident that on the corona third wave, God forbid, but in case there's a third wave, we'll be able to face, not just because of vaccine, but we have ramped up the capacity of oxygen, intensive care units, hospitals and so on. So I think third wave is something which all of us, like PM always says, sabka vikas, sabka saath, sabka vishwas. But now he very clearly says sabka prayas. Corona is something which is not just only government's thing. Each one of us will have to take it as our own duty towards our neighbor, our friend, our whoever, and the country therefore. So that is one. Second, of course, the challenge which is extraneous is the developments in Afghanistan. And I would think because it is in our neighborhood, even that is something which we'll have to be extremely watchful of. Does it have a bearing on the economy? We don't want it to have a bearing on the economy, but of course we'll have to keep a watch.
How worried are you about the high inflationary numbers?
No, I think it has come down We are doing everything to have things brought in, essential goods imported if necessary. Foreign exchange reserves are also comfortable. So if necessary, greater imports can also be allowed without making a harmful impact on our farmers, because we are conscious. We want to make sure that the farmers' produce get their due prices. We don't want to undercut them, undermine them by bringing imports in. But we will be managing the prices.
Ma'am, your budget for 2021-2022 was framed in a different context. Then there was this debilitating second wave, which has of course upset the lot of calculations that you have had. What will be the extent of the slippage on the budget numbers?
Strictly speaking, because we have given an emphasis on expenditure, that to infrastructure expenditure, health infrastructure, and Prime Minister is closely monitoring every department as regards the quarterly targets. The second wave, of course, hit our first quarter. Second quarter, we've tried pushing, but some residual delay in expenditure has been noted. Hopefully in the third and the fourth quarter we'll clear that. So slippages, if anything, which should be worrying me, are if they are not spending the infrastructure spending. But I wouldn't think that would be a worry, because most of the departments are conscious that they should go ahead with it.
Are there particular heads that you're concerned about?
Well, if it is infrastructure, it has to span across so many departments. And health, obviously ramping up infrastructure is going to be a challenge, but I'm sure that it is moving, because we are not just looking at government, we are also looking at private infrastructure expenditures.
There are a lot of budget decisions that are pending. For example, like the Development Financial Institution to fund infrastructure. There is also privatization of public sector banks. When can we expect some movement?
No, the DFI is moving forward, and I'm sure sooner we'll be able to come up with something.
And do you see disinvestment and privatization perhaps being casualties in this entire thing?
No, I don't think. I'm confident that we'll be moving with disinvestment targets also.
And Air India sales particularly seem to be a matter of huge concern. Would you
No,
say?
it's going on. It's going on and keeping the time schedule.
And what about the Air India, which has a debt as of March was around 43,000 crore? Will the government be absorbing some of it?
Well, we'll see how it goes, because you'll know when the tender documents are opened and what offer we have given everybody.
Ma'am, last question to you. There is one concern which became like a controversy also, was about what Panchajanya, which is RSS associated magazine, had said in the context of Infosys, saying that they are anti-national. This of course in the context of they managing that very important portal, and you have been personally involved in ensuring that the glitches are no longer there. How do you view their statement?
But strictly speaking, I think government and Infosys are working together. I had of course called them twice, also drew the attention of Nandan Nilekani, and they are working together with us. They are also being helped by the Institute of Chartered Accountants Association of India. We have also brought in some tax experts to work with them, and I'm hopeful that Infosys will give us the product. Yes, it has been delayed. It's hurt a lot of assessees. We've brought in a portal with a lot of expectation, but many of which had glitches. All that taken on board. I think we should work together to have that done, and I'm confident that Infosys will work out.
And would you say the statement calling them anti-national and also saying that they are trying to destabilize the Indian economy is
that wasn't right. That wasn't right. That wasn't right, and I think they've also had a statement coming distancing themselves from whoever wrote it. I think that's not called for, and rightly people have withdrawn themselves from associating themselves with it. That wasn't right at all.
Thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.